Would you look at that? Chris Van Vliet is back. This is like a full-on beard here. I hope you like this conversation as much as I do, and if you do like it, please actually hit the like button. Number one, because have you seen the cool new animation that happens when you hit the like button? Oh, right? And also, it helps, not just for me, but for anybody's videos who you watch on here. Click that like button. It takes less than a second. So a big thank you in advance for that, and a big thank you to NordVPN for sponsoring this video. I'm sure you've heard me talk about NordVPN on a bunch of other videos, and the thing that I love is just the peace of mind that it gives me when I'm traveling around using public Wi-Fi, that people aren't just jumping in there, snatching my information away. But the best part, for sure, is that you can change your virtual location with just one click. So you can go to the map there, choose a country, click, boom, you're in. So you want to watch a show that's available only in, I don't know, France? Now you can. Très bien. And I've had a lot of people message me about this, but yes, you can still watch the WWE Network instead of the very censored version that's on Peacock. Just change your virtual location to a country that still has the WWE Network, and that's it. It's super fast, super easy. You can do it on either your phone, we're doing show and tell here, or your laptop, just sitting in front of me, so I figured why not pick it up? So NordVPN has always been so good to us, but they're now giving you the best deal that they've ever offered here on the channel. Grab your exclusive deal by going to nordvpn.com/CVV. Not only is there a huge discount, but they're also giving you 4 months for free. Yeah, 4 months for free. And of course, it's completely risk-free with NordVPN's 30-day money-back guarantee. To get that deal, and it's only for a limited time only, go to nordvpn.com/CVV. nordvpn.com/CVV. So good to see you again, Billy. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, Chris. Nice to see you.
It's so interesting to me that when I mention to people that I'm interviewing Billy Corgan, they're like, oh my gosh, pumpkins, that's amazing. And like, I feel like every single day, new people are realizing that no, Billy Corgan does in fact own a wrestling company. You own the NWA.
Yes, this is not a dream. I actually do own the National Wrestling Alliance. And, it's been a great commitment and a great honor. But, I feel just now, probably now in the 4.5-year mark or 5-year mark, that it's finally kind of going the way I want it to. So I feel pretty good about it.
Oh, in what way? Like what is going your way now?
I think it takes time to build culture. The easiest analogy you can make, and analogies never work, but I'll make it because it's early. You can try to buy your way to a World Series, or you can build a culture and a system. And I chose to not try to buy my way to the World Series, but try to build a system. And I think now you start to see the system that I built, the consistency in the talent, the consistency in the narrative, the consistency in the ability to put on a show and have a high quality pay-per-view every time we go out there. I think that took time, and it required a lot of patience. And having been through kind of a brand build with the Smashing Pumpkins on the music side, I sort of know what that feels like. And I know what victory looks like, and I know what fake victory looks like. And so I've been very focused on actually building something that will last and endure past me.
If we were to make a Venn diagram, how much overlap do you think there is between Smashing Pumpkin fans and wrestling fans? Where are they in the middle there?
Very few. Very few. I wish a few people, not to disparage your question, but a few other people have asked a similar question. And trust me, I wish 100,000 Smashing Pumpkins fans would come over and want to see the National Wrestling Alliance. It would make my job a lot easier. It would certainly enthuse the talent. It just doesn't translate that way. So it is what it is. It does help when you're dealing with media. It does help when you're dealing with the corporate side of things. I walk into a meeting, even if they don't know the NWA, they know me. So that sort of opens certain doors. But the job of building and rebuilding the National Wrestling Alliance is sort of going to have to stand on its own 2 feet. And I'm proud of that in a weird kind of way. I mean, like I said, I wish it was easier, but knowing it isn't easier, I'm proud that we've been able to build something as a team that has an endurance and isn't really sort of a cult of personality built around me. I'm very proud of that.
It certainly feels like they're two different worlds, but I imagine there is something that's like similar. What is similar between the world of music and the world of wrestling?
I do think that the changes in the way social media creates fandom and support for business, that's become very similar. In essence, I call it the hothouse effect. If 100,000 people are interested in something, probably only about 20% of those people and or 20,000 would be paying attention on a daily level. So what you want to do is you want to take those 20,000 and continually market to the other 80,000. And hopefully then if you get everybody engaged, then they'll market to a wider audience. That is very similar now dynamically between music and wrestling. It's about what's happening day to day. I started making these arguments 20 years ago in music, and it fell on completely deaf ears. Real quick, because I don't like to overly talk about the music business in this context, but 20 years ago, it was about doing a big buildup to an album. You release the album, you put out a couple of videos, and you kind of go away. And I started making the argument 20 years ago, no, you almost have to be constant, but it's a different kind of constant. So a different kind of constant in entertainment these days, and I'll include wrestling in that, would be, here's a bit of news, here's a piece of merchandise. Hey, we're having a show. Oh my God, we did this cool thing with the charity. Check it out. We're so happy to be part of this. It's sort of like, there's got to be kind of a rhythm. In essence, the brand almost takes on the role of a personality, and behind that personality, you feel there's sort of an up and a down and a positive and a negative, but the negative isn't always negative in the literal sense. The negative can be, you go away, you come back, you do this other thing, you surprise people. It's just so different than it used to be.
When you talk about surprising people, what do you think the biggest surprise for fans has been in the NWA?
I think probably that those who underestimated what I was doing and why I was doing it, I think those people are probably surprised at this point that there sort of became a thing, and it sort of congealed a bit during when we shut down during the pandemic, kind of like, oh yeah, the NWA, cool that it's back. Even people who I like Eric Bischoff, came out and said he probably shouldn't have brought it back. Oh, it's going to go away. Oh, it's just kind of a thing. It was a hobby. It's a throwback thing. It's not really going to compete in the modern world. Oop, here we are a few years later. We're competing in the modern world. I'm talking to networks. I'm talking to all sorts of people constantly. We're able to run world-class, wrestling events that certainly on a talent level are competitive at the highest levels. So I think that sort of surprises people. It's weird, and I've gone through it again in music, where I'll say something, and I think because I say it, people go, oh, okay, he's saying something that's true. Entertainment is very much about kind of like, yeah, but show it to me, prove it to me. Right. And so a lot of things I said that were quite honest and true, people just didn't believe me because I think they just thought I was talking to talk.
Well, I mean, when we had our last conversation, which was almost 3 years ago, which is, crazy, right before the world shut down.
I've kind of gone like this and you've gone like this, right?
That is not.
I feel like I'm in your shadow now. I feel I was doing a favor for a young guy, and now you've blown up.
Yeah, that is very kind of you to say, but not even remotely true. But you were saying at the time then that, you want to be in the same conversation as WWE and AEW. Obviously, you had to hit pause because of everything that was going on in the world. Do you feel like you're still now in that conversation?
Yeah, and it's proportional. Look, I'm not running 4 to 5 hours of content a week. I'm running an hour to hour and a half. You have to look at things sort of to scale. So if you look at it from the perspective of what the major companies spend and the oxygen that they get from media versus what I spend and the oxygen I get from media, you can see that I'm actually outpacing my costs. So we're actually sort of ahead of the curve as opposed to behind the curve. It gets frustrating when you feel like you're behind the curve, but now I feel like we're ahead of the curve. So, for example, I was recently talking to somebody who's actually in the television business. They looked at all my numbers, they looked at my expenses and stuff like that, and they said, how the hell are you doing what you're doing? How are you producing over 100 hours of television a year at these numbers with this level of quality? And I said, it's culture. It's building a team. It's finding the right talent. It's creating an atmosphere where talent feels they can take chances. And if they sort of go off the beaten path for a second, somebody's not going to come with a club and sort of knock them out of their loop. That takes time. It's, again, same thing. It can come out of my mouth, but people don't necessarily believe you. And I do deal with a lot of people on the wrestling side that have had promises made to them and the rug kind of pulled out from under them. So it takes them time to believe that the NWA is a safe place to work, both physically, but also sort of, let's call it emotionally, which is not a word you throw around a lot in wrestling. But, these are, high strung, talented people who want to feel that their efforts in the gym, their efforts, in the public are going to be rewarded. I saw recently, I can't remember who it was, but it was a high level talent for the NWA saying how much they love the freedom of the NWA. It's such a fantastic place to work. That takes time to build something like that, where a talent feels they can go out and say something like that. And it makes sense to people. It's sort of like they're not taking some sort of weird chance, or they're going to be accused of defending me when I don't need to be defended or something like that. So it feels really good on that.
I just feel like there's this underlying with talent. There's this underlying thing in wrestling where like you take everything with a grain of salt. You're like, yeah, I know that they said this was going to happen, but I don't expect that to happen. It certainly seems like the case with what you're doing and the NWA, that you're delivering on these promises.
Well, I'm sure not everybody would agree, but I think, again, it's sort of like, what are you offering people? For example, we've done a good job of taking talents that were undervalued, putting them in a position where you realize, oh, wait, there's actually a lot more in this talent than anybody would have realized. In some cases, people came along and wanted to poach them up and give them jobs, which is fantastic. I mean, that's just a credit to what the talent did and what we were able to do together. In other cases, we've had talents that were completely disregarded in major companies, basically told, you got nothing left in the tank. And here they are years later with the NWA, main eventing pay-per-views. So, that's part of what we've been able to do. And as you sort of put those pieces together, let's call it veteran talent and young talent that's overlooked, you start to build a culture where now maybe under the right set of circumstances, and that will be happening relatively soon, we can start to be competitive in the free agent market.
Are you hoping, is the plan to have a weekly television program?
Well, not to correct you, but we already do have a weekly television program.
On TV, I mean.
But it is on TV. It's just different TV. No, I think, look, I don't think anybody would argue if a major digital platform came along and gave me a bunch of money and say that wasn't TV. I think we're still in this weird schism of like, well, is YouTube TV, is Fight TV, is Peacock TV, is NBC, network television TV. Yeah. It's sliding scale. I think everything has to do with economics and reach. So the great thing about the YouTube model in particular is you can reach everybody. The hard thing about the YouTube model is you never know when you're dealing with their AI systems, what's being recommended. You can have one video that'll go crazy and you think, oh, everything's going along great. The next week it'll do 1/10 the numbers and has nothing to do with anything you did or didn't do. It's just weird how their AI works. That's what's frustrating. It's hard sometimes to get a real read. Look, access, marketing, and economics always go together. So we're still in a medium where, the economics are purely my own. I'm sort of driving it on my own vision. But of course, I want partners. The reason I've been resistant to this point is no one's made me an offer where either I want to give up equity in the company or give up control in the company on some level to go into business with somebody else. So, but we're right on the edge now where I'm starting to have those conversations where real numbers are being thrown around and real interest is being thrown around. And I also think it does in a strange way has to do with the weird and beautiful re-uprise in the pumpkins in my own sort of side. These things in entertainment are cyclical, and the pumpkins are probably having the biggest period we've had in 20 years. We're about to do another arena tour this fall. So those things do kind of go together because, again, when I go into a boardroom and they talk about, okay, what's your vision? What's your numbers? What are you doing? And then they see that I'm headlining Madison Square Garden, it doesn't hurt. Those pieces do start to get put together.
It'd be great if like we talked about earlier, it'd be great if some of that could rub off to the NWA.
I've begged, I've pleaded, I've cajoled. It just doesn't translate. I think the nicest compliment I get from fans, Pumpkins fans, is, hey, wrestling's not for me. I'm not a fan, but I checked it out because you and I really enjoyed it. And I recommended it to somebody who is a wrestling fan, and then now they're into it. And so you see, there is sort of a causal effect there that does work itself out. And the other bright spot, I think, is where 5 years ago when I was doing things in wrestling, or even 7 years ago, fans treated it as like, gee, can't you just stick to music? And I wish you just sort of focus on music. Now I don't get that at all anymore. People are very respectful of the idea that I could have two lives and they see my commitment to music. I mean, we're just about to put out a 33-song record, so no one can accuse me of not being committed to music and continually touring. Plus, I have small children, so it is really a sacrifice on my family to have such a robust music career and be full-time in the NWA. And I think now that fans have really seen that over time, they sort of respect, okay, that's his deal. And I don't have to sort of be negative. So at least let's call it it's a positive sort of apathy, like, oh, I'm not really into it, but it's kind of cool that he's doing it. So I do think that does have a little bit of a halo effect in how it rubs off.
What does your time management look like between the I'm going to call it 3 jobs because it's music, it's wrestling, and it's being a father.
No, you forget I also have a tea house cafe here in Highland Park, Illinois. So it's technically 4 jobs, but I'm probably, in terms of my businesses, about 140 hours a week of work. Yeah.
When do you sleep?
I don't. That's the thing.
Is the world a vampire or are you a vampire?
I think it's a bit of both. Yeah. What's the math on that? If I'm 140 hours a week, that's how many hours a day, right?
I got a 140 hours a week.
20 hours a day. I'm probably exaggerating a bit. It's probably
20 hours a day.
Yeah. It's probably
168 hours in a week.
Okay, I'm a wrestling promoter. I am exaggerating. It's probably 120 hours a week. It is nonstop though.
That is. So what does the balance look like, and how are you able to put the Smashing Pumpkins on hold while you're doing this right now with me?
It's just you get into a workflow where it's like you just switch brains. Like as I'm talking to you, I got a text message from somebody in the NWA, right? It's like as soon as I get off the phone with you here, it'll be right to texting about stuff involving, the upcoming shows in St. Louis for the 74th anniversary shows. It's just constant. It's constant. It's the only way I can explain it. It's just constant.
Is there a moment ever where you're on stage in the middle of playing like 1979 and you're like, oh, you know what? I should probably do this with Tyrus and the NWA.
Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah. It's not to denigrate my job in any way, but if you've played long enough, you have the ability to kind of think about other things while you're playing. I used to joke and say, get to the point where you could think about your taxes. But yeah, I'll definitely be sitting there thinking about like, oh, hey, that's like Madison Square Garden. You play Madison Square Garden as you're playing, you're like, oh, that's the entrance where Hulk and Superstar used to walk through in San Martino. Like it's right there. That's pretty cool. And they're like, okay, the ring would have been there. Meanwhile, I'm playing the song, you know what I mean? Like the song's still going. So
does the reverse happen when you're, booking wrestling, you're in the control room and then you're like, you know what? That'd be a great thing to do on tour.
No. When I'm in wrestling, I'm pretty much all in wrestling. There's just no time to think. As you know, because you've been backstage at a wrestling show, it's just like a nonstop. Oh, hey, can I talk to you for a second? Hey, I don't like this finish, blah, 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 So.
Yeah, you're being pulled in a lot of different directions. And I would think that one of the most difficult things about your job at the NWA is dealing with talent and telling people you're going to win this way, you're going to lose this way, or, even worse, maybe we're not going to work with you anymore.
There hasn't been a lot of that, honestly. I think I'm blessed in that I worked on the indies for long enough to sort of start to understand that mentality, what was important to a professional wrestler and why. Then I worked at TNA, not only in booking, but also as a producer. So I got to sort of see intimately how people translated their characters through the screen and then how it portrayed itself in the wrestling ring. And as you work from independent talent to higher level talent at TNA, you saw the difference. Like, this is important and this does matter and this will draw money and this isn't as important. And so I think when you have those experiences and then you have a company like the NWA, where it is sort of my world, I have a different sense of it. It's not like I just bought the NWA and I had no experience in wrestling. I'd sort of been working in it long enough that I sort of can appreciate, why. I once had a conversation with somebody who's now a main event WWE talent. They were in TNA at the time, and they didn't like a finish on something. And I had to go in a trailer, which they used to have these trailers at Universal, like side trailers, and talk to this talent for 45 minutes about why they, quote unquote, didn't want to carry the other talent for 45 minutes. And so it became this long dissertation on their character versus the character I needed to be put over. And those discussions are really valuable in the long term because, in going back to myself for a second, I get offers all the time. In fact, I got a strange offer yesterday. Somebody wanted me to come play like a private party. Somebody who was booked to play the party got COVID. And so as a last second thing, they kind of reached out to me. It's local. Hey, can you come do this thing? And it was for a decent amount of money. And I'm talent half the time. So I'm sitting there thinking, is this worth it? My time, the thing, blah, blah, blah. I call somebody on the phone. So because I've been talent too, when I have those conversations and I'm seeing talent be talent, I know what it feels like to be them. And you're trying to say, look, I think I'm more valuable here than you're giving me credit for. And I think the conversations generally break down along the lines of reassuring or explaining to the talent how you perceive their value as it regards to the NWA. There are talents who are super valuable on the indies that aren't as valuable to the NWA.
Mm.
There are talents who are super valuable to the NWA that aren't that valuable on the indies.
Mm.
So it's important for me also to communicate to those talents, hey, look, for me, I can only speak for me. This is your value here. This is where I see this going. If it doesn't work for you, that's cool. Let's just shake hands and not do business. And honestly, there's been very little parting along those lines. So that tells me I have a good sense, generally speaking. And a lot of credit goes to Pat Kenny, who runs talent relations, because of course he has to deal with it sort of on a day-to-day level. And he's done a great job of sort of explaining to talent what the culture is in the NWA and giving them the option. Look, here's option A, here's option B. Option C is come back another time when maybe there's a different fit. And again, very few talents have left under option C, for lack of a better joke.
Are you going to play that show?
No.
Oh, okay. All right.
If I told you how much money it was for, you'd probably yell at me, but no.
Well, I would. I'm sure I would. Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, and it's always so interesting talking to you because I know what you meant to me, and I know what the Smashing Pumpkins meant to me as I was, a teenager. It was the soundtrack of my youth. It was a soundtrack.
You only look like you're 19 years old. So what are we talking about here?
It's just great lighting. That's what it is. Great lighting.
You got to send me that light because I need it too.
I'll send you the Amazon link.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
But it's just, you were the soundtrack of my youth. And I'm sure that you hear this all the time when people are saying things like this to you. But I'm so curious, a song that you wrote 30 years ago, does it still mean the same to you? Do those lyrics still mean the same to you when you play it now?
It's sort of like, it's like a fine wine or something. It sort of grows into something else. It's not what it once was, because you change, but then your perspective on the value of something changes. There are songs that I'll play in my current life where I have a hard time understanding the young man who wrote that song. I know it's a good song, and I've certainly sort of been rewarded for it, but I have at times struggled to understand where that guy was coming from. But at the same time, I can sort of tangentially related to like, well, here's where I was in my life. Here's what happened since. Here were the good times, the bad times. Life is very good right now with a young family and lots of success and lots of things. So yeah, it's sort of just, it gets deeper and wider in sort of a different way. But yeah, I think it's like saying, hey, go put on your high school basketball uniform, and do you feel the way you felt when you were on the playground at 17? It's just not the same. It's like asking, is the 10th love the same as the first love? No, but the 10th love has something different to it because you have a different level of appreciation.
On the flip side of that, what about someone who goes, man, those lyrics, every single one of them, Billy, means so much to me. How interesting is that when it was your story and it's your words that you're putting out there?
It's always pretty humbling because, I'm just sitting in a room talking to you, right? There's nobody in here. Most of my life is this situation, a hotel room, a bedroom, guitar. It's just me and the words and the music. So it's pretty wild sometimes when you think that something that happened in a room like this reaches somebody on the other side of the planet. And next thing you know, they're getting married to the song. Children are born to my music. I mean, people play my music when they lose a loved one. I mean, it's very humbling. And at times it's hard to understand. The ego part of you wants to go, of course, of course it was me. Look, there's a billion gazillion songs in this world. Everything. I was trying to explain to my kids who are 6 and 3 what a CD is. Like, why? Because I was doing something with some CDs and my kids were like, why do you need a CD? Because they only know the world on the phone.
Sure.
Hey, mommy, play. They love Rock Lobster by the B-52s. Mommy, play Rock Lobster. There it is. Boom. That's the world that they know. So this idea that you got to carry around these boxes and the CD, explain, well, this is the way we used to listen to music. And yeah, things change, and now that music is so accessible to so many people, the positive side is young people are finding my music like never before. our numbers on TikTok are totally insane. It's wild. Suddenly there's tons of young people at our concerts. Very, very humbling. At the same time, you're like, oh my God, I'm competing against the whole world at all times. You know what I mean? Including BTS, who's like, one of the biggest pop bands ever. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
Yeah.
The picture shifts. So on one hand, you're like, wow, this is cool, because all these cool things that happen now that wouldn't have happened before. And shit, now there's all this other stuff I have to navigate. It's pretty wild. But look, the best part is the NWA, right? Going to its 75th year of continuous operation. I'm still playing music. I'm still headlining, festivals and arenas. It's a wild, cool ride.
I'm curious what the song people get married to is. Is it Today?
I've heard them all. And sometimes actually the song's kind of depressing, and I'm like, okay, have a happy marriage. You know what I mean? Don't blame me when it doesn't work. Yeah, I don't know. I've heard them all. I
remember it being like a really big news story when you decided to shave your head. And I'm so curious. It was, right? What was the actual process?
That's the stupid part of my life. Right?
What do you mean?
Well, you make headlines for stuff that doesn't mean anything, right?
Yeah.
Like me at Disneyland looking sad. You know what I mean? It's like, you just go,
that went all over the place.
Yeah. I was on the Family Guy of all places. Yeah, I don't know. That's the stupid part of it all. It's like, I don't get that either, but I'll take the father-daughter dance, to 33 or something. I'll take that all day. The other stuff I can live without.
What was there a lot of thought that went into, I've had long hair for a long time, I'm going to shave it? And
no, I just didn't like the way my hair was looking. And I was just like, woke up one day and that was it. I just shaved my head. And then you get weird compliments when you shave your head. Like, the shape of your head is so nice. You have such a nicely shaped head. Like, okay, thanks. You know what I mean? It's like, you have nice thighs. It's like, what do you do with those types of compliments? You go, oh, gee, thanks. I don't know. It's just.
I remember Weird Al did like his takeover of MTV, and he was playing the 1979 music video, and he was like, "Hey, Mister, shine your head for a chord." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I didn't even think about it."
Yeah, well, let me tell you something about Weird Al. He had to call me once to ask my permission to use one of my songs, so I got him back on that level.
What's the thing that you're most proud of in the time that you've owned the NWA?
I just think that we're still here. Look, I wish, and it goes back to the conversation about Pumpkins fans, right? I wish magic, right? You put the key in, you turn the car on, the NWA, it's back, here we go. And everybody goes, fantastic. And suddenly just tens of thousands of people want to watch, and tens of thousands of people care. And Pumpkins fans are like, yeah, I'm really into wrestling now. I wish it was all magical. It's really, really difficult. It's really hard. It's a complicated market, as you know. There's never been more independent talent. And in a way, independent talent has never been more valued than in this particular market. So it's a lot to navigate. So the fact that we're still here, we're still running, we're doing a 2-night pay-per-view, coming out of a pandemic. We're working at the Chase, which hasn't allowed any wrestling in but the NWA, which is a miracle in itself. There's just so much cool stuff. And I'm proud of that. I just think that's the best part. Secondarily, the quality level, the consistency, the actual raising of the stakes, putting talent in higher and higher pressure situations, which they should be as talent. I want to be in high pressure situations. As the NWA comes up, so comes up the pressure. And we're seeing who's going to be the next star of the NWA. That's just all the best part of it.
Yeah. What did it mean for you to be able to give Matt Cardona his first major championship?
You know what? I didn't really think about it that way until it happened, and I heard him talking about it, and I was like, gee, because in my mind, he was a star. So I'm not a person who necessarily correlates championships to stardom, but obviously that's usually the way it goes. There's no question that in his previous life, before he became Matt Cardona, he was certainly undervalued. And he was a guy who continually got over no matter what was put in front of him. I was certainly a fan and impressed by what he was able to do with seemingly not a lot. And there have been people, in fact, I work with them, Aaron Stevens comes to mind, where they were in a particular situation and no matter what they were given, they were able to get over because they're super talented people. So it was not a question in my mind of putting a belt on Matt, but having put the belt on Matt, I think what really distinguishes is not only has he done a great job, not only has he brought a new audience to the NWA that maybe wouldn't have necessarily been interested in the programming, but in probably his darkest hour with us when he was injured, and here's a pay-per-view named in his honor, and he's facing, it's probably a 5 to 6 month rehab, and the freak that he is, he's already pretty much rehabbed in 3.5 months or whatever it is. The day he has the surgery, he holds up the 10 pounds of gold, cuts a promo and says, "I will be at the pay-per-view." And he comes when he doesn't have to come. And I thanked him. I pulled him aside and I said, "Look, I really have to thank you for what you did." And he says, "Well, it's not a big deal. It's, sort of what I do. I'm here and I'm committed and I like being here." That to me is why he's a champion. Yes, he's a champion because he's a star. Yes, he's a champion because he's a draw. Yes, he's a champion because he's a top level professional wrestler. But to me, he's a champion because he's a great person to work with. He represents the company on every level, behind the scenes and in front of the camera and to the public. So even somebody yesterday asked me, how'd you feel when he got hurt on somebody else's show? And I was like, well, that's his life. I mean, I support that. Yeah. And by extension, I support the other efforts of other independent companies, including Game Changer. Why would I I don't want Matt Cardona to be on the show. And I didn't take the question wrong, but it was weird to me because it's like Matt Cardona is an independent professional wrestler in an era where he should be an independent professional wrestler. And unless I'm willing to come in and, break the bank to sign him to an exclusive contract, he should go out and do exactly what's best for him and Chelsea. So, yeah, no problem. I mean, that's just the breaks,
When you said earlier that you'd like to be in the market where you're getting free agent talent, is that the hope, to get people to sign with the NWA and lock them into a long-term deal, exclusive deal?
We'll get there. It doesn't work economically for us in most cases. There are cases where we do have talent under contract, and it is important that those talents are under contract. But overall, the minute somebody comes out of WWE, okay, well, the chances are you're probably not going to outbid the other people in the market who are interested. So those talent are not necessarily calling me to ask whether I want to pay, and I'm not necessarily calling them to try to compete with somebody who's got more resources than I do, and obviously bigger platform. I don't see that as competitive in that sense. I think qualitatively it's competitive, but I'm not competitive on the free agent market at this time. I think when we're able to get a bigger platform and get more resources, then hopefully we'll start getting those calls. And it is what it is. Look, I've referred to it a few times through the years. People used to ask Bill Belichick how he built the Patriots into a perennial, Super Bowl contender. And he said, look, we have one superstar and everybody else we rate as an A- player. So in our eyes, we're getting a player who's just a tick below a superstar at a value that's very valuable to the Patriots. And if we can build a culture here that we can consistently win, as long as we have that one star and a great supporting cast. In the NWA, I'd argue right now we probably have 6 stars maybe, and a great supporting cast who are overproving their value, which is why the quality of the product is so high at this time. So imagine a situation where now I'm able to have, let's say, 10, 12 people under contract, be competitive in the free agent market. Then I think you'd see the product, the quality level, and everything associated with the NWA go up like a rocket. But I'm not in a position to blow that money right now because I just don't think we would get it back.
Do you feel like the wrestling landscape has changed a lot over the last, it's changed a lot over the last handful of years, but over the last month with Triple H now in charge in WWE?
I'm looking forward to seeing what he does. Somebody asked me, if I saw the changes, and I said, I don't think you don't turn a battleship around quickly. That's a big, big institutional culture with a lot of moving pieces. So it strikes me as somebody who runs a big organization in the Smashing Pumpkins world, that you don't sort of just start flipping switches and just see what happens. You're going to poke around and of course, put your people in place and stuff like that. I think we'll know in about 18 to 24 months what the real vision under Triple H is and the difference in the product. I do know that, well, it's a speculation. So I'm going to say that I'm speculating. I do know that as AEW has gone out of their way to sort of try to pick fights with the WWE world, and overall the WWE world has not responded. I don't necessarily think that's going to continue under Triple H. I just don't feel he's the type of personality that's just going to sit there and have people kind of sock him in the chops over and over again, and he's not going to respond. I mean, he was in D-Generation X, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think he was a big part of that sort of sass that they had. And I think there's business there as well. You know, at some point it's like, it's, you know, it's blow for blow, it's competitive. Now, the general position, of course, I think from WB corporately, at least from what I see from a public observation point of view, is they've sort of treated it like we're not going to sweat it publicly, even if we're sweating it a little bit privately. I think those dynamics are definitely changing.
And we've talked about NWA, WWE, AEW. Where does Impact Wrestling fall into this whole landscape, in your opinion?
You know, I think what's really good is that Scott D'Amore wants to be part of this emerging ecosystem where Impact can play with other companies. Obviously, they had a relationship with AEW, but now that seems to be opening up into other companies, including, once again, with the NWA. I like where Scott's taking the company. I said it years ago, even though it was a bitter exit for me, I thought that Anthem was the right company to take over what was TNA and now Impact. They've steadied the ship. They've created a consistent culture. And certainly they have a hardcore fan base that's very loyal to the product, as they should be. It's, you know, it's now what, 20-year history. So I like that Scott's on the chessboard along with myself and other companies. I think so far he's been a great faith partner as far as working. And I think there's lots of stuff that we can do between the NWA and Impact. And I think there'll be a player for years to come. Look, there's plenty of room. You could blink 10 years from now and you could see a landscape where it'll be WWE, AEW, Impact Wrestling, New Japan, AAA, and the NWA, and they'll all be important in the American market. I think that is completely conceivable and possible. WWE, even though they have this hegemonic position, they do not command all of the wrestling landscape. And I think that television networks and the advertisers are starting to see, hey, there's a lot more money here than maybe we would have imagined, since most of it was funneling in the WWE's direction. And I think you see it in a quick analogy would be when McMahon's tried to start the XFL, whatever it was, 15, 20 years ago, and it didn't really work and it was considered a disaster. And then he brought it back. Now The Rock's taken that over, and now you have the USFL. Now you realize in the current landscape for television, and I'm making fun of your word television here, but in the current landscape, you can see now where football will be 12 months a year.
Yeah.
And why wouldn't it be? Like, yeah. It was weird before. It was sort of like, to a fan, and I was a fan of the NFL at the time, I only wanted to watch wrestling during those months, and I kind of wanted to get away from it. Now, if you're a fan, you think, well, shit, I want to see the up and coming players. I want to see the guy that got cut from the NFL and he proves himself and he's a star in the USFL, and then he goes back and becomes the starting quarterback for the Broncos. I think you see that's all going to open up now. I've been predicting for years that you're going to see a breakaway NBA league. There's so much money out of China. There's so much money out of India. Are you telling me that a retired superstar, the level of LeBron James or a Kevin Durant, can't start their own breakaway basketball league? When you look at the talent level between, I don't know how many guys are in the NBA. Let's say there's 800 or 1,000. If you look at the talent level from the next 1,001 to 2,000, it's pretty close.
Sure, yeah.
So if you watch a competitive, let's see, alternate league basketball league, you're going to see a lot of competitive stuff. So I think you're going to see breakaway leagues. I think you're going to see a complete explosion, because the one thing that's been proven in the last 10 years, particularly to television, digital platforms included, is that live event television programming is something that still continues to draw, which is where wrestling. Wrestling is perfect. And now they're taking those things seriously when I have those meetings.
And I think that, and we could talk for hours about the landscape of television and how it's changed so much, but live television is truly the most important thing, because if you want to watch a television show, you're watching that on Hulu or Netflix or HBO Max or Peacock or whatever. The thing that's commanding your appointment viewing is the NBA, the NHL, is pro wrestling when it's live and it's happening in this exact moment.
Right. So let's go back to the thing we were just talking about. Let's say, the NWA finds itself in a situation where we're running, every other week, live tape. Okay, now you're in a competitive situation. Now you're drawing more people. Now you look at a free agent market. Somebody might want to come to you who feels like in another system they won't get a chance. Mm-hmm. Where the NWA will feature their talents, where in another system they would be sitting on the bench. So that's where we'll start to be competitive, and that's not far from where we're standing right now.
What do you think is the biggest thing you learned from your time in TNA that you're now taking with you in your pocket in the NWA?
Probably how to shoot I hated, I, I was probably the biggest complainer when I was in TNA of how much we had to shoot and put in the can due to spoilers and all that type of stuff. I hated how we'd have to shoot 3 months of television, all that type of stuff. Now I get it. Now that I'm in the position that Dixie was in, where you had to make these economic choices about how much content you shoot, how much talent you have access to, how much you can ask the audience to sort of be patient with you. And so I learned how to do that there. And it wasn't a skill set I thought I would need, leaving TNA, and it's been very valuable. Because there were nights in TNA where we were shooting at Universal, and we'd run poor Drew Galloway, out there 4 times in the night, and every time he'd go out, the pop would get a little bit less, and I'm friendly with Drew, or friends, and the 4th time he come through the curtain, he'd look at me like, Jesus, they're killing me out there, So it's experiences like that that are valuable, because I'm very sensitive about how many times to run talent through a curtain on a given night and a taping night and stuff like that. Luckily, we're at a point now where we have so much talent on the roster, I pretty much don't have to run people out there more than once a night, which is fantastic, because it keeps the crowd fresh, and we're able to have really good taping cycles.
I remember going to Impact tapings or TNA tapings, and it would never be filmed in chronological order. So I'm like, wait, what's going on here? And then
I was part of, I might have been part of some of that. We used to purposely try to confuse people occasionally, because we didn't want the spoilers to necessarily make sense, even if you read them. So we would shoot stuff out of sequence sometimes. And there were times where you just had to shoot it out of sequence. And that was mind-numbing, because somebody would win, and then the next night they'd cut the promo about, I'm going to beat you. And it was so surreal.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Throughout this whole conversation, you've been saying like the NWA is back, and it's amazing that it's back. Was there ever a thought that it might not come back?
Oh yeah, during the pandemic, I definitely had those days where I was like, oh, this is not going to work. It wasn't that it wasn't going to work based on the plan that I had. It was like, do I have the commitment level to do this at the highest levels? It's sort of like the joke I like to tell. It's like, you're going to take an 8-mile walk. You walk about 4 miles, and you start thinking about turning back instead of reaching your destination. You have that thing like, well, I could turn back now, and I haven't gone too far, or I could just go to my destination. And I was sort of having that conversation sort of daily in my head. I talked to people publicly, privately in meetings about what was going to happen with the NWA when we came back. And people were surprised I was expressing reservations about restarting. And I think, some people ran and started whispering around, oh, he's going to sell, oh, he's going to get rid of it. I had no intention of selling. It was mostly, do I have the deeper commitment level now that I see what it's going to take to complete this particular journey? Do I have what it takes? And the good part is, once I've made that decision, I'm all in, and I think the product has really benefited from my commitment. And that's not to put me over. I think the talent sees how committed I am, and that gives the talent the confidence that to invest in the NWA as a product and as a culture is going to be rewarding for them for years to come.
So there is a destination that you're headed towards?
Absolutely.
What is it?
The CVV level up here, where you are.
I think you should probably set the bar a little higher.
I'm going to set the bar a little higher. No, I want the company to return to international prominence and be competitive at the highest levels with the biggest companies. I think that is, if you heard me say that 5 years ago, it sounded like a pipe dream. And if you heard me say that 4 years ago and saw how much money I was spending, you thought, no, he's never going to get there. Now that you see where we're at, where we're going, who's involved, what we're capable of, and what'll happen when we gain more access, more resources, and a little bit more ground under our feet, you start to go, okay, he might actually pull this off. Just the fact that it doesn't sound like I'm insane when I say it. I think that tells you that I've done something.
But I mean, I'm sure you would agree that life's not about the destination. I'm sure once you get to
in this particular case, it is about the destination.
And
no,
then
it really is.
And then
it really
stops?
is because look, the hardest lesson to learn in the entertainment business, and I'm including wrestling in the wider conversation. Obviously, I've had more experiences in music. The hardest thing to understand is that the public is really interested in the day to day, what's happening. When you become successful in anything, in entertainment, there's a feeling of like, oh my God, I climbed up this massive mountain. Can I take a breath? And the answer is no. Then when you become quote unquote a legend, like I hear, that's when you're getting old. People start throwing around the legend word with me, right? You're a legend. Well, okay, great. I'm a legend. Does that mean if I go down the street and I announce a concert, it's immediately going to sell 15,000 tickets? No.
Probably, actually.
Well, it depends, but the answer is generally no. But my point is the public's insatiable need for what's next is totally fine. From the entertainment side, you wish it had more of a kind of like a climb, take a break, climb, take a break. It does not work that way in the public's mind. And I think you see it in different times with different companies. There's points of fatigue. There's points where they get a little bit lost. They have to kind of refocus. It's not because people aren't trying. It's exhausting to constantly try to be at your best all the time. It's just not a natural human condition. And so, yes, in this particular case, the destination is to reach the highest levels, because otherwise everything we're doing is not wasted, but won't be as valuable as I want it to be. And why would I put my time? I have a great life, and I'm not here to brag. I mean, I've been successful. I've had a great run. I mean, great. I could stop. I could continue. To take on something like the NWA, make it a full-time job, work 240 hours a week. You gotta really believe that you're going to get where you want it to get. Otherwise, the journey bit, I think I had the journey part in TNA. I did the journey there. I went through a whole journey there of like innocence to like what is happening to investment to what is happening, lawsuits and public acrimony and all that stuff. I've already done the journey. This is a very deliberate plan to bring this company back to the highest levels. I'm committed to the idea that there will come a point when the NWA is no longer mine, and when I turn it over to somebody else, hopefully in past the 100-year anniversary, that it'll be a prominent company that will have great value not only for fans but also to my family. That the work will have been worth it, and then the investment. And when I can turn to a Trevor Murdoch, who will hopefully be working in the office at that point, or a Nick Aldis, or a Mickey James, or whoever's involved with me on a business level, and now we're still working together on the office side, that we'll have all our efforts will have meant something in a very particular way. And otherwise, to me, I do think in this particular case, it's a Super Bowl or bust.
So if that's the destination for the NWA, is there a destination for the Smashing Pumpkins, or are you already there?
I think that it's very rare in public life on the music side to have a big run be considered sort of like, oh, it's never going to happen again, and then have another big run.
Yeah.
Our big runs are about 20 years apart, which is very, very rare. If you think about it, you could probably count on about your hands and your toes how many people have actually done that, gone down and kind of climbed their way all the way back up to the highest levels. So that would be the goal for us, is to do it twice.
Wow. I mean, you're doing it right now, and it's so
we're in the
exciting to
neighborhood.
watch.
We're in the neighborhood. Look, we live in a very interesting time. There are acts in the music side that go out and tour consistently, tour stadiums without hit albums. That is completely unprecedented in the music business, in the history of the music business. Usually you could only tour stadiums if you had a hot record and a big hit on the charts. There are bands out there that are touring stadiums right now that do not have a hit record on the charts and haven't had a hit for years. That is completely unprecedented. So we've seen
TikTok's changed the game.
TikTok's changed the game, but also has what I would call, it sounds like a Star Wars title, the rise of the brands, right? The institutional brand. Little inside baseball for a second. 10 years ago, when the Pumpkins were not in as strong a position as we are now, I would have meetings and people would basically look at me as an asset and say, well, here's what you have that's valuable. If you dump all that you have that's valuable on the table, you make money and you go back up the ladder a bit and you'll be good. And I would be like, no, I'm not doing that. And they would be like, you're insane. And I'm like, no, I'm actually going to rebuild this thing. I'm not going to dump these easy assets on the table, and I'm going to rebuild it from the bottom up musically and culturally. And they would say, it's impossible. You cannot, you just won't do it. You're wasting your time and you're wasting your money. Well, I've done it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I've done it the right way, which is about fans and brand. And in those meetings 10 years ago, I used to tell these people, and they wouldn't believe me. My brand, the Smashing Pumpkins, is more valuable than you think it's worth. In your system, it's down to whether or not I have hit single, whether I'm in a commercial or a movie or or I appeared on the Grammy Awards. I'm telling you that the value of this brand is greater than you can measure. And I actually had a meeting once with a high-level executive in the record business who came in with a stack of papers like this. And they said, we just did a survey of 150,000 people in Europe. And he said, I think you'll be quite shocked by the results. And the results essentially were, and they had all these famous bands that they had polled, Pink Floyd, the Beatles, I mean, you name it, who's who of Rock and Roll Hall of Fame acts. And our band was one of the top rated bands for customer satisfaction and brand awareness and brand positivity. And he was like, we see these numbers over here in the survey, but we don't see them in the sales. And I said, yes, because you're not marketing to these people of what the brand is worth. You're marketing them in the old fashioned way, which is if you don't have a record on the charts, you have no value. What does Fish go? Fish is a band that I can't think of if they've ever had a major hit. If they had, it's been a while. They can go do what, 20 Madison Square Gardens. Grateful Dead, I think we had one hit song in their entire musical life, maybe two, right? The rise of the brands has been the real shift. So back to wrestling for a second, I think we see the rise of the brands by an independent level. So we see the rise of Matt Cardona as a brand, the rise of Chelsea Green, the rise of Mickie James, the rise of Nick Aldis, Trevor Murdoch, Tyrus. People try to quantify Tyrus as a talent. How can you?
Yeah.
He appears on television 3 times a week in front of over 2 million people. He's a best-selling author. He just sold out a comedy show the night before NWA 74.
Yeah.
People want to talk about him as a professional wrestler, which he's a great professional wrestler in my opinion. But if you leave out all the other things that Tyrus is, if you leave out all the other things that Matt Cardona is, if you leave out all the other things that look at what Mickie James' brand did for the Empower pay-per-view last year. WWE completely underestimated the Mickie James brand. Mickie James brought her brand to the NWA. We ran a very successful pay-per-view off the Mickie James brand. That's kind of what I'm talking about. I go on it forever because the subject I'm fascinated about. I realize most people are not as interested in as I am, but I think that's what you're seeing. And I think that's kind of what you and I are poking around about here. It's like, what is the value of the NWA? The NWA is far more valuable than you would realize looking at it now.
Yeah.
I don't play the if game a lot, but you could play it in this particular instance. If the NWA was with the right television partner or the right financial partner, you put those pieces together with me and my level of celebrity and my level of access with the roster and the culture that Pat Kenny and I have built, and with great talents like Matt and Nick and Mickey and people like that. And then you put all those pieces together with the institutional culture of the NWA. Okay, now you have something.
Yeah.
Now you realize how undervalued the NWA is.
Yeah. I think that life is like about a series of decisions. Some decisions can like change your life. And I really wonder, Billy, what had happened if you didn't pick up a guitar when you were younger? Amazing. Look, I'm all about gratitude. I actually wake up every day. I say out loud 3 things that I'm grateful for. And that's how I end every interview as well. So what are 3 things in your life right now, Billy, that you're grateful for?
Certainly my family. My family gives me the support and the strength that I need to be such a crazy person in this world. I'm very grateful for the fact that the Smashing Pumpkins has continued, and we've been able to mend fences and be a brotherhood. So many years later, I think like 35 years later, which is just really crazy. And then, of course, to be the steward and the proprietor of the NWA, literally the grandfather of them all, the company which, created the AWA and, what was Continental, I believe, and became the WWF, that all sprung out of the NWA. So it's part museum, it's part legacy, it's part opportunity, and but we're in it. We're right in the middle of it. And the fact that we're running these pay-per-views, and it's just cool. I'm just grateful. I try to stop, at least once or twice every time we're having a big show, and go out and get past the curtain and stand in the crowd a little bit and really feel, because you got to realize what it takes people to make that decision to come, to spend their hard-earned money, to give you their time. It's important that you always stay humble on that.
It's always such a pleasure to talk to you. And I'm so grateful for the time that you always give me in these conversations. So thank you so much, Billy.
Thank you, Chris.